The Investigator's Toolbox is here. Are you a licensed investigator, an investigative or security professional? How would you like to gain work-based skills, be more productive, and grow your business? Well, welcome to the investigatorstoolbox.com. Check out this industry-changing website that's pioneering into the future today. You can network with other investigators in our forums. You can take a webinar, check out a blog, or read an article to brush up on your skills. You can visit our vast resource catalog of research websites and bookmark them in your own private library. Everybody's talking about the Investigator's Toolbox. This really is the future of networking, learning, and resource management. Check this out. For a limited time, we're offering a legacy discount for new members. If you sign up early, we'll save you 25%. Take advantage of exclusive discounts from site partners like Crosstracks, DelphPoint, PI Magazine, Hetherington Group, Scope Now, Parabon, and so many more. Just visit the website investigators-toolbox.com and check out the demo video in the Who We Are section. Can you afford 41 cents a day? If the answer is yes, then don't delay. Join the community. investigatorstoolbox.com. These discounts won't last. That's www.investigators-toolbox.com. Welcome to the show. It's another week of twofers. This time we have OSINT guru Michelle Stuart and database king Neil Caddell. The discussion starts off with the differences each type of research brings and ends with some great tips on the ethics of investigations. Michelle is a top-notch teacher and has spent the last 18 years teaching investigators how to do research. And Neil brings almost 40 years of investigative experience to the table. It's a great show. But before we get started, we want to give a special welcome to our new sponsor, Amos Insurance. Do you work with an insurance agency that takes the time to give you the personal attention you deserve? Well, contact Michelle Knoll and her team to get the best customer service and attention available. You never need insurance until you really need insurance. Keep yourself and your business protected. Contact Michelle at mknoll@amoscorp.com. Links in the description. Thank you for supporting the show, Amos Insurance. Welcome aboard. Now let's welcome our guests and your host, private investigator Matt Spare.
And welcome everybody to this week's episode of PI Perspectives. Well, this week we got another 2-for-1 special. Today we are welcoming Neil Caddell from IDI, and he insisted on having Michelle Stuart along with us. So I am going to welcome both you guys to the program. Neil and Michelle, how are you guys doing?
Good. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely excited to get to talk with Michelle. I don't know the last time I've actually seen her live.
Right. So Michelle, you're in Arizona. You operate JAG investigations, and you also do some teaching as well, right? So tell me a little bit about your background and what you've been up to.
Oh my gosh. Well, my background has been around for 30 years now. And the first 10 years of my career was pretty much economic fraud, financial fraud investigations. And that was back in the days, if you remember, we had a lot of receiverships. The savings and loans were going into receivership. We had a lot of handshake deals back in that time. So we had big, large portfolios of money that we were chasing down. And really about 15 to 20 years, I started looking at open source intelligence and really watching how the internet started becoming a tool for us to utilize in pulling out data in our investigation. Something that could have taken us weeks before now, could take us just minutes and getting.
Right.
So for the last 18 years, this is what I've been doing, is training open source intelligence. So primarily my field covered law enforcement, military intelligence. My larger clients have been Homeland Security, FBI, and then that's pretty much right now. I work the insurance fraud cases, risk management, and anything really. Right. I mean, open source can be utilized in any investigation. You know that.
Yeah, and we're going to dig into that open source versus paid database. That's essentially what we're talking about here today. So the trainings you've taught at University of Virginia and also at Quantico as well, right?
Yeah, I was a civilian at Quantico for a particular program that was open source intelligence for international. So it would have been anybody from Latin America to European countries attended those trainings.
Yeah, my only experience with Quantico was a TV show, which I was addicted to.
Yeah, I
don't know.
Watch it.
I don't even know why I love that damn show, but I couldn't turn it off. It's terrible TV. Absolutely terrible.
Yeah, anything to do with law enforcement, usually on TV, I just can't watch it because it's so unrealistic.
Oh yeah, Law and Order is like that for me too. I'm like, I'm screaming at the TV, wrong,
I know.
wrong. Okay. So Neil, you have worked on the database side, and prior to that, you actually were an investigator, and you come from medical malpractice investigations background, right?
Yeah, I had worked for one of the largest private investigation firms that worked medical malpractice defense in Manhattan and Long Island, and basically 5 boroughs.
Right.
And a lot of his stuff actually was kind of the precursor to open source data, because there was the beginning of the internet, so to speak.
So how did you make that transition from actually being an investigator to going to work for one of these database companies? What did that conversation look like?
It was very interesting. I had worked for a small boutique firm in Manhattan for 9 years, and then for about 13 years I had my own firm, and I always was very much interested in the databases. Basically, kind of what Hank Asher started back out in their early 90s, and unbeknownst to myself, I had been emailing back and forth with a fellow named Hank the programmer, and next thing I know, I was talking with Hank Asher, who basically was the godfather of these industries.
Sure.
I did a few focus groups, and then I came down here actually and met him on at least 2 occasions back in the early 90s.
Right. It's an interesting time. Definitely a time when the industry really changed as far as what was available and what you could do. I think before that, it was a lot of telephone books and working with other manuals to get information. Right.
Yeah, when a small firm I worked with, he had there's 5 boroughs, and there was Nassau, Suffolk County, there was Westchester and Putnam County, then there was the counties in New Jersey. So he had about 15 to 16 different counties of reverse directories. These books were huge, they were voluminous, and it was a good $6,000 to $8,000 a year he's paying for these books. But it was before there was a company called Metronet was out there on one of the first go rounds of the internet searches.
Right.
But you would reverse an address or even a phone number in these books, and it was just gold. You thought there's a match for a name, and then you would go out before your investigation even started if you're going to do surveillance, and you would just basically knock on doors, talk to the mailman to see if your person was anywhere near there. That was the first the start of how you would do your surveillances and your investigations.
Yeah, I mean, and that required a real skill, right? Creating that comfort level where people would actually answer your questions when you're asking them, right? Not intimidating them, right?
Oh, absolutely. This was in the late 80s, early 90s, and it was all skill. It was also pretexting. It was really prevalent. I had the best pitch for it. I always talked for my financial company, and I had tax-free annuities that paid 10%. They were tax-free. How does that sound? And who wasn't going to be interested in that pitch? So you got to be in sales in order to be a good PI, really.
I wonder how those annuities are doing today.
Yeah, I'm a billionaire.
Exactly. So how about you, Michelle? What made you have that epiphany or just that idea or passion to really pivot towards training and making that a huge part of your business model?
Honestly, I was married to a police officer at the time, and that's really what I wanted to do in my career. Is I wanted to be a police officer. And but when I had met my ex-husband now, we both decided obviously that we should only have one in the family.
Right.
And so I was always really involved in a lot of the investigations where they would ask me to do research, or could I find this or could I find that?
Right.
And so that's when I really started looking at the internet and trying to figure out really how to find the bad guys by utilizing just information sources. Because think about it, and a lot of the people who are listening have been around for 30 days, we didn't have data systems like we have today.
Sure.
And so it was really a lot of that knock and talk. It was really a lot with pretexting.
Sure.
And so that really is what got me interested in it when I started seeing how easy it was to try to get some of the information off the internet that would have taken me, as I said, double the time and trying to get somebody to answer the phone and answer questions. And pretexting back in those days was really simply the number one way of getting information. And so with the internet, it really changed the way that investigations were done, and I enjoyed it a lot more.
What are some of the other techniques other than pre-texting that are no longer available that you were very instrumental in helping you do your work? Michelle, you take that one first.
I'm sorry, what other stuff is no longer available?
Besides pre-texting, what other techniques do you think that used to work back then, that were available back then, that are not necessarily available these days?
Well, they're still available to in a sense, but I don't think they're as good. We just talked about directories. And, when I used to do it, we had the cold directories. We also had Thompson directories for all the financial banks and all the savings and loans that came in those big books.
Right.
And now most people don't even have landlines. They have the cell phones, they have VoIPs. Right. So a lot of those directories that we had the capability of utilizing, really, I don't think is as beneficial now, because you can throw an app on your phone and have, 4 or 5 different phone numbers to your cell phone that not even associated to the number that it's actually billed to.
Sure.
So I think that's one of the biggest things that's changed, is technology has changed and made things either easier or more difficult. In a lot of sense, more difficult.
Right. Right. How about you, Neil? Is there something you can think of that was very instrumental back then that you can no longer do?
Yeah, there was a few of these other directories that some of the forefathers or investigations had that built out there. The Mike Dorez's of Merlin had these, unique floppy disks, and Kelly Riddle had a deck that he would sell for like $49.95 to investigators, and it was you'd basically go to these local shows and you were just kind of interested in what was the cutting edge.
Sure.
I mean, back then the cutting edge was looking at somebody who had a cell phone and had this big block thing they're walking around with. It was pretty silly. I had a cell phone in my car when I started working for this other PI, and I parked in the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and they stole the inside part of the phone, but not the actual phone out of the car. I don't know why it had any value to them, but the phone didn't work anymore. And then I think the first month's bill I had when I was working for him was $800.
Well, at least you probably had the Benzie box to take your radio out, right? Just nothing for the phone.
Yeah, exactly. Of course.
And you had the note in the window, right? Radio gone.
Yeah, radio gone. Oh my!
Please don't break my window. You got to love New York in 1970s and 80s.
Oh my God.
Good times.
It was crazy.
Good times. So obviously, like nowadays, things are much different. These last 6 months, obviously. So Michelle, why don't you tell me a little bit about COVID and how that has affected your business, and how have you pivoted? Because you probably were doing a lot of traveling with training, right?
Yeah, COVID has really changed, I think, everybody's business almost to an extent. With me, it definitely slowed me down and from my traveling. Last year, I was on the road over 200 days. And I normally speak between 80 to 90, 95 conferences or trainings a year. And March 13th, I call it, D-Day was when I came back. That was pretty much, where everything started canceling. And so now a lot of the trainings that I did before in person has done pretty much what we're doing now is via podcasting or webinars.
Right.
And so I miss the interaction on one-on-one. I really do. I miss seeing people's faces and interacting with my crowd. So this, to me, it's obviously doable, and I'll do it all day long if I need to, but I really miss the interaction.
Yeah, and now you'll be in a room full of people, and it'll just be a sea of masks, right? You'll see a bunch of eyes, but no mouth. You won't know if they're soaking up what you're talking about, or if it's just flying right by. So yeah, that's the next challenge, right? We'll be allowed to get together, but everybody's got to wear masks, and you're going to miss that. That face, literally face to face, is not going to exist.
I actually have one training right now where they asked me if I would wear a mask for an 8-hour training in person, and I'm like, no, it's just not going to happen. And it's not that I don't mind wearing the mask for 8 hours speaking, though. It's just your face gets hot, you get sweaty, and
sure.
I don't want to. So what they determined to do is use a huge plexiglass.
Right.
Like, I feel like I'm going to be the Pope behind that big window.
Pope Michelle.
Plexiglass that surrounds me. And I'm like, seriously? That's what they want to do.
Well, look at it this way. If they start throwing tomatoes and cabbages, you won't get dirty.
Exactly.
Fantastic. How about on your side, Neil? On the data side, right? You obviously have the pulse of the investigative community. I'm sure the everyday investigator is like, whoa! I got to slow down with the type of business that I'm doing, or how my budget's being allocated. So I'm sure that's been a challenge. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, it's been very interesting in the past when you're trying to build a rapport with some of the larger concerns that are out there, some of the bigger PI intellectual firms that are out there. It would take you, oh gosh, a bunch of meeting invites, try to get on a call, with an email, with a voicemail through the gatekeeper. Now sometimes I'll pick up the phone and I'll call somebody over at a Pinkerton or a G4S, and next thing you know, they're picking up. And I'm like, oh, hey, how are you? It's like they have more time. It's a whole different business model.
Right.
I brought a few more people in. We're fully staffed of outbound. We work behind plexiglass. It's like a hockey arena with everybody's got in a penalty box in my office. Right. But I always, made the joke that I'm going to break out hockey goon fights Fridays. So we're going to, see.
Drop the gloves.
I'll wear gloves and go at it. But
so,
you got to keep, yeah.
Who's wearing the Ty Domi jersey? That's what I want to know.
Oh, I love it. I'm a New York Ranger fan myself. If anybody gets that call back.
Yeah, Ty's a good guy. I've actually met him a few times. Yeah, he's a nice guy.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. But you get today's society, especially with COVID, of course, you got to keep it light. You got to keep it interesting. You got to keep it safe. You got to be relational. And with the database comes, it's actually been a really good time because we're IDI and IDI core product. We've been spending a lot of time talking with vendors of data. They've been influenced by COVID. Sure. We're trying to do something different. We've almost over 2,000 different sources of alternative data. We're going to be putting an app that the PIs and law enforcement are going to be able to have use to, right. Just for those crowds. And we're trying to become a little different and to pivot during these times and understand where these guys are at, and gals with their businesses. I really believe that the time will change how people are doing investigations. You wonder, Michelle, how open source intelligence research is done, but how much of the investigation now is in-house in the office, and how much is it actually going to be boots on the ground anymore? You always wonder.
Oh, I know. I agree. But the thing about open source to human intelligence is you always need both. You right. really do. Open source intelligence takes a certain mindset, and the individual who's boots on the ground takes a certain mindset. And so even in my trainings, I always say you got to have both. You honestly do, because there's so many things online that could be absolutely fabricated, and we've all seen it in our investigations. And you have to be able to prove it otherwise also. So human intelligence and open source intelligence is always going to be hand in hand.
Definitely. So we are going to jump out and take a quick break, but I want to expand on that point when we come back and really dig into this, the back and forth between open source and that paid research, and how it's definitely important to utilize both. It's almost like you have to do the due diligence. So everybody sit tight. We're going to jump out real quick and we'll be right back. Are you using a case management system? The answer is no. You should really rethink that process. All right. So as you guys know, Crosstracks has been an amazing sponsor of the show. They've just been really supportive. As you guys also know, I didn't used to have a case management system. I was the investigator that was fighting them tooth and nail. I finally decided to give it a whirl, and what a great decision, right? During the COVID shutdown, I was able to actually roll my whole business into it and get completely up and running. My clients love it. I mean, just today, I got a phone call from a client of mine who just couldn't believe how easy it was to access everything and how invoices were there. He actually asked me to go back and upload all my prior cases and put it into Crosstracks. I've been doing business with that firm for, about 8 years, so it's a lot of cases. If you don't use a case management system, you should, right? You should check it out. Give Crosstracks a shot. Contact Brad or one of the teammates over there, and they'll get you up and running with a trial and see if it's for you. If you have used Crosstracks and it's been a while and you're not happy with the system that you're in, go check them out. They're doing a lot of really cool new things. See if it's right for you. If you're unhappy with the system that you're in right now, contact them. The ability for them to roll your system into their system is very easy. Again, you guys know they've been sponsoring this program, and I can't say enough good things about them. But make your own decision. Give it a shot on your own and see if it's right for you.
Did you hear about the latest issue of PI Magazine? Well, check out the cover feature on the Investigator's Toolbox. You don't want to miss this great issue. Available today. Gain greater insight into people, assets, businesses, and their interrelationships with IDI's next generation investigative platform, IDI Core. Through a massive data repository, advanced data fusion technology, and more intuitive UI, IDI Core uncovers the relevance of disparate data points, providing actionable intelligence to support your investigations. Register for a free trial at ididata.com/PI Perspectives or call 844-778-1740. Also, look for IDI at the Osmosis Virtual Conference October 11th through October 13th at their virtual exhibit booth. IDI also presents a roundtable special this Thursday on PI Perspectives with industry leaders Neil Caddell, Kelly Riddle, Mike Doris, and Jimmy Messes on October 8th, hosted by our very own Matt Spare. What do you do when you get calls for bug sweeps? Did you know USABugSweeps.com, the #1 TSCM provider in the country, pays you a 20% commission for converted sales leads? Stop turning money away. USABugSweeps.com uses top-rated technology, and they cover all of the United States. So save time and make money today. Contact USABugSweeps.com and mention PIP20. Have you signed up for the Investigator's Toolbox yet? Well, what are you waiting for? Don't miss out. The legacy discount is ending soon, and you'll miss a great opportunity. Are you serious about growing your business and increasing your knowledge base? Well, register today at investigators-toolbox.com. Use code PIP20 1836 and save an extra $15.
And welcome back, everybody, to PI Perspectives. We're here today with Neil Caddell and Michelle Stuart. I want to welcome you guys back to the program. How are you?
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, good.
Okay, so Michelle, before we jumped out here, you started talking about the in-person research as opposed to the computer research, and how it's necessary to do the both of those. So can you expand on that a little bit and just give me a little more detail?
Yeah, I think that when we're looking at, as I said, the OSINT, the open source investigations, and then the human part of it, is open source investigations is really what people are putting out there about themselves, right? So it's going to be their social media landscape. It's going to be information from marketable systems that have sold it. And so let's say some of those sites like True People Search, that gives us an abundance of information. And so the reason it's really important to utilize both the data systems and then open source is because the data systems, for one thing, gives us the ability to get that a huge amount of data within seconds. And a lot of that is going to be made up of public records. Whereas the open source of it, like when I always teach in my class, open source is kind of the footprint of what they physically have done. They go to the grocery stores, they go to Walgreens, they go to CVS, they order magazines, and all of those little things that they're doing leaves a footprint behind.
Right.
And so that data is what also ends up on the internet. So we need to have the data systems, again, that have a huge, faction of public records. And then we have the open source stuff, which is the individuals themselves who are leaving their personal footprint from what they are doing and saying.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So I heard this recently on, I think, one of the other podcasts I was listening to, or I don't remember where I came across, but it was talking about how the information on the open source also is it's giving you a lead, right? It's telling you that something is there. It's telling you that there's, Jones versus the state of New York or whatever, but it's not showing you what's in Jones versus the state of New York. You actually got to go to the courthouse, pull the file, and there could be other relevant information within that file. So it's almost giving you a lead, right? Looking at it that way, right?
Yeah.
Now you have to go substantiate the lead once you have it, right? And there's value in that, right? So it's helping you with your methodology on how you're doing your investigation, pointing you in the right direction to making sure that you're getting it done properly, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And a big part of that open source is the actionable intelligence. It's all those people and all those associates that rotate around your suspect or the person of interest. And so when it comes into data systems, again, you're looking at very, very specific data that we're going to be getting. And when it comes to open source, if I'm looking at you and I can't find your social media because now you've either deactivated them or maybe you're privatizing them, I'm going to look at everybody around you.
Sure.
So it gives me that ability to start looking at your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your mom, dad, brother, sister, wife, spouse, kids. So there's a huge arena of information now at our fingertips.
Yeah, I had a case like that out on Long Island where there was a kid who was driving a box truck, and he was a young kid, and he liked to smoke the marijuana, right? So he may have been high that day, who knows, right? He was driving the box truck and had no experience driving a box truck, and decided that, you know, the side of the box truck, the mirror that was sticking out, yeah, he wanted to hit somebody who was directing traffic with a stop-go sign during construction. Well, she ended up having a head injury and ended up dying, right? So this kid, he locked down his social media. It was done. You couldn't find anything about him, right? And we found all his friends. And, you know, they all like to talk about race cars and driving fast and smoking weed and getting high. And you know, there was one thing where he was talking, this kid was talking about going to the DMV the day of the accident. So he had an appointment to go like renew his license at like 8 o'clock in the morning, and then had an accident at like 10 o'clock. You know, it was just really bizarre stuff. So yeah, I mean, they're breadcrumbs. You got to follow the breadcrumbs. So Neil, why don't you
absolutely.
Neil, why don't you tell me, like, how does a paid database like IDI Core, how does that help to make an investigation more efficient?
Yeah, and just to kind of expound on the open source and the database, you know, I probably up until the 2010s, I was still doing a couple cases a year. And initially when I was working, you know, in the database world, you know, you get some information on a subject, and sometimes it's not enough. And then even you start getting into their own social media, and then you find out that they're locked down, like Michelle referred to. And then typically you'll then start trying to figure out who their friends are. And then next thing you know, you're basically almost backdooring into their own social media from the subject you're looking for. And I had a kid who was down in Miami, and his mother was looking for him because he got $4 million when he turned 18. And in 3 months, he blew the $4 million. And so he had 5-bedroom penthouse and down here in South Beach, and all his buddies driving Lambos and Ferraris they were renting. I didn't have to do anything because all the behavior was out there on the internet, on all his buddies' pages. I knew what they were doing that night before the kid probably did, because it was already posted.
I'm sure they were probably making it rain somewhere, right?
Oh, they did. They were buying Jay-Z $100,000 bottles of Ace of Spades, and this kid's bar tab, I had copies of it. Some nights was over $100,000.
Wow!
Oh my gosh!
Can
you imagine blowing that much money? It boggles my mind.
Yeah, and in the end, I got to admit, I felt sorry for the kid because he was being used by these kids. He was kind of slow. I got him on a private plane and back to rehab, and you know, he still relapsed a few times after that, but I'm understanding he's doing okay now, but that's about, 5 or 6 years later.
Right.
But in the end, I felt sorry for the kid. He never even knew I was there. I was a shadow for 30 days with all the people that we'd hired to, it was a high profile. And then in the end, they gave $500,000 to the hotel, and they basically wrote it off just to get rid of him, to get him out of the room.
Wow. Wow, that's impressive.
But without the open source and not the database to start with, because the database had information that connected me to people that were in his life, and just other information that was out there. There's a lot of stuff on the paid databases, but also it's a trained investigator that knows what to spot, what's interesting in the paid databases.
Yep.
And you might run a few different searches, and you don't know what you have, and that's where a person. Like Michelle will come out and then she'll do her investigation, but then she's just like a rock star in the world of open source and kind of put it all together, almost like the computer mind you got there, Michelle. That's what I've always thought. I don't know. Are you a cyborg?
Where do you put the batteries?
I can't bake cookies and I can't make your brownies, but I can profile the crap out of you.
She's trying to assimilate all the investigators. Fantastic.
Yeah.
The collective. Nice.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's interesting. Like I always find it's super interesting actually. When, my business, I service law firms, right? I work on the plaintiff side and all that. And I'll get those phone calls from a paralegal going, we have XYZ account, and I'm not going to name names of accounts, but it's one that's very well known. And they say, we ran our search and we didn't find anything on this. We need you to locate this person. And I'm like, okay, well, send me what you have. Give me whatever pedigree information you have. And it's literally 5 minutes. Like, I'll just run it through my system. Like, oh, okay, here's where it is. That's where they were.
Yeah.
And I'll get them on the phone. Like, hey, your case settled. The law firm's trying to get a hold of you. We had one of those this week. It's like, you're getting money, but you won't answer your phone, right? One of those deals. And it's the trained eye. I think you bring up a good point, right? Anybody can look at a page of data, but if you don't know what you're looking at,
yep.
it's kind of a waste of time, right? So,
Well, and another thing is too, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to
No, go
interrupt
ahead.
you.
Go ahead.
And another thing is too, when it comes to databases into the world of open source, is today was a specific case I'm working, and I'm trying to qualify information about a very high sitting asset in a company. And she has herself pretty well shut down, but she has 2 sons. And so they're 17, 16. And so running them on databases isn't going to help me because they're not going to have a profile.
Right.
And so that's when open source really has a bigger chunk of information for us that we can utilize in our investigation. So when we're looking to try to qualify information again on an individual who I'm trying to research and I can't find anything, but if I then can, find information about her kids and then backdoor it that way, that's what the big difference is from open source to the databases is the age.
Yeah,
that's a great point, Michelle. It's like, databases start at 18 plus. And it's always been from the beginning. You have to be,
Yep.
What's considered a non-minor. And also when you get beyond there, they do quickly build some footprints out there, especially because of the social media. There's also a search that we have in IDI Core, which is an owner-operator search, and you're trying to find some of these tough to locate subjects, especially the younger ones and the millennials, and they don't have much of a footprint out there. With credit cards and credit headers, and they're tougher to find. But what you'll find is that they get their nice little cars and they'll go out and get the car service, even if it's a lease, which is typically what they're doing these days.
Yeah.
But then they'll go and that information is captured in a marketing file, and that these companies, that the car dealerships, the Jiffy Lube type companies, but not Jiffy Lube, but somewhere you get your car, you might get your oil changed, or even mom and pop shops that use these CRMs. So this file is a good file that we've purchased, where you can put someone's name in and just put a city and state in, and you'll get a series of matches, and it'll have VIN numbers. And even in California, which is a state that doesn't sell vehicle registration information,
right.
It's a great source.
Yeah.
It's a more great alternative data source that we offer.
No, that's really awesome. And that's the thing. Like, you're talking about young people and things like that, right? So the next thing is all these live stream apps, right? And the ones especially that are monetized, like Big O Live is one that's coming down the pipe over here, where people go on there and, hey, I've got a video, give me a tip, right? So buy credits, and then you give me credits, and now we've got money laundering essentially going on online, right? And TikTok, obviously, stuff like that. That's where these younger people are living these days, and that's investigations have to pivot because you got to be able to look at that stuff, and it's just another can of worms to open up and take a look at, essentially, right?
Oh, that's for sure.
Great. Okay, so what would you say is like the best piece of information that you can get out of a paid database that you can't get through open source intelligence? Give me that one.
I would say is that I get to see the nuts and bolts of the database and how the scoring goes into an address, and I'd even if we're even considering releasing how many sources have matched to an address, and when you look at it, it's pretty amazing. I was hovering over my addresses, and there was like 15 or 16 that had tracked me to my home address where I'm at right now, from property records to credit headers to phone file data points to other alternative sites, companies that you never even imagined were there. And that's how the scoring in a database works. What I think is interesting is sometimes you'll look at like 13 addresses on an individual, tough to locate subject, and about halfway down you'll see an address that looks like it's been there for, I don't know, 6 months, but you can't find any other information connected to it. And then lo and behold, you reverse that address and you'll find a cell number on somebody, and then you reverse that back, and you find something that connects back to to your subject you're looking for. And then and at that point, it's almost like an aha moment, because there is bits and pieces within these databases that that blows your mind that they're all connected somehow. There's some reason why that address shows up.
Right.
Sometimes it's just a fat finger error. Other times it's not. And then I had a case where it was a death penalty case years back, and it was just a simple old phone number that was on what they call a DD5, which was just a witness statement. And you reverse that and the number, and no one had ever reversed the number, and it was from like 15 years ago. Well, it came back to an individual in Louisiana, and in the end, the name that I was looking for was somebody named Tiny. And it turns out that it was Tina, Tiny was the daughter, and then they had a witness all of a sudden.
Yeah.
So it's sometimes you just love to find those needles, and I know you guys have all found them before, but without coming up with this number within the database, which let's started with the DD5, but then you run it through a database, and phone numbers are so important even today.
Yeah, phone numbers are super important. That reminds me of a case I worked on probably about 3 or 4 years ago. I had somebody who was having an inappropriate relationship with somebody for hire, and so that person for hire had a very shady background, and they were using, they obviously knew what they were doing, right? And they were basically setting people up and then taking advantage of the situation. Somebody set the honey pot, you fall into the honey pot because you're not doing something that you should be doing, and you get caught, and now you got to pay me or else, right? So it was one of those situations. And, we started to do research for this particular person, and I thought I had this huge aha moment, right, where I got the number, and I was able to reverse it, and we were able to figure out who it was. I got a name, and then I started doing research on the name, and the name was the freaking public defender for the county that this guy lived in. So he went out and he bought a Go phone or whatever, and he registered in the name of the public defender. I was like, well played, sir. Well played.
That is so awesome.
Yeah. So I was
smart and funny criminals at the same time.
Yeah, I was like, wow, that's really genius, man. This public defender's probably getting crazy phone calls, right? At the end of the day, I got my person though. Yep, I got him.
Awesome.
Yep.
If we see that on Law and Order coming up, we know they were listening to your podcast.
Exactly. Right.
Exactly.
Throw me some writing credits, please. You can't make this stuff up. I mean, it's like super funny, right? So
oh my gosh, true.
But the guy, the person actually had they made some mistakes in some other areas that we were really able to dig in. And what was interesting about it is it was a subcontract out to me from another investigator, because he's like, hey, you're pretty good at this computer research. He goes, I'll tell you what, he goes, I'll give you half of the money if you can find this guy, and it was a good retainer, it was a really good retainer. And, we were able to get the job done, and it wasn't necessarily me. It was me, picking into some of my resources. I did my work, but I also brought in some other people that I trust to take a look at things. And in that meeting of the minds, I think there were probably about 3 people that worked on this. We were able to crack it, and I got half the retainer, which was pretty awesome.
And it's always so awesome when you get it done.
Oh yeah.
When you actually figure out who it is. That's always the biggest rush for me.
I yelled at the screen, gotcha.
Yeah, I know. That's just it. It is. It's so much fun.
Yeah, it's definitely a thrill, right? The things that make us happy, it's shameful.
Other people like to go swimming or go to the beach.
Right, exactly.
We're chasing criminals, all excited.
Win the lottery, stuff like that. For us, it's like, I want to get my man or woman.
It's a totally different lifestyle, that's for sure.
Yeah, it was. That was definitely an interesting one, and it was something I was like, oh, okay, I can pat my back on that, just because I knew when to call. I knew when to bring in, somebody a little more, gritty and seasoned in doing this type of work, right? And that's the other thing too, right? So you've got your open source, do your research, you've got your paid database, and then you've also got, when you got to call in super tech person who's at a higher pay grade than you on doing this stuff when you need to, right? But it's important to hit that checklist though, have that methodology, right? Did you do this? Did you do that? Did you look here? Did you do this? And for me, paid databases, that's my plumb line, right? So that's where I get my pedigree information to knock out the white noise, where I know I'm looking at something, and if it doesn't line up with what the paid sources are telling me, I'm not totally discounting it, but I'm questioning it, right? And I'm circling it and saying, I gotta come back to this later and take a look at this a little bit further. So,
absolutely. And I think that's what you just said is a really good example. I had a case just yesterday that I'm tired right now. I was up till 4:00 in the morning working this case, but it really seriously, the database is what had to finalize it for me, because on this particular individual, it's a kind of almost a blackmailing type of case. And we're trying to connect the dots to see how this person might know this person who might know this person. And so my expertise in open source intelligence, there's nothing out there. There's nothing showing the connection. There's those, I always call it the handshake, that social media.
Commonality.
That links those two together. Yeah. And so on this one, it was complete opposite than the case I'm working today. Today, everything had to do with me getting information via social media. Last night was everything that databases connected the dots. Because by taking the three individuals and looking at them independently and seeing everything that was associated, from email addresses to phone numbers to physical addresses, in a database type of setting, it was easier then to see where they are connected. Because as I said, in social media, they weren't connected. But on paper, you could start seeing some of the connections come out by they were utilizing some addresses to a vacant building. And so that's what really helped me on this one, was the database side of it, not the open source side.
Sure.
Yeah, and I was just going to expound that a little bit. I was talking to a detective who was describing a case where you look at the old mob movies where they always got the picture of the big mobster and the different families, and there's and then he was talking about he would have those pictures, but he would also then just put page one of like an IDI course search next to the picture, and then he would just keep looking at the addresses, and then within that would be phone numbers and first degree relations and associates. And then next thing you know, he was getting matches to individuals, and the second or third look, when he'd come back to look at it, that he would then say, you know what, those people are associated, and there was a connection there because of X, Y, and Z. Be it, it turns out when you dig a little bit deeper, a wife whose maiden name was something else connected to the brother, and to a job site. There's a lot of POE in there. That's within IDI core, as well as when you get into social media and you start doing your open source. And as an investigator now, it's a lot of information closes because of regulations. As you marry the two, the paid database with the knowledgeable open source, you even look smarter now than any other investigator if you know how to do a good, smart, ethical search, and to how you follow your dots and close your cases. I mean, that's what's paramount now, is making sure you're working stuff correctly. Otherwise, it's fruitless.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree.
Yeah, I think that's why you need to have that methodology, right? To have that checklist. And I think you touched on some good points here. And Michelle, why don't you talk to me a little bit more, because I thought Neil started talking about some important things like ethics, right? So when you're doing this, your training for doing research online, I'm sure you cover some sort of part of it with ethics. So talk to me a little bit about that, and what's appropriate and what's not appropriate.
Well, it's, when it comes to ethics, one of the biggest things to me, I feel that nobody should ever friend. If you have a subject of the investigation, I will not create an undercover account and friend that individual. And, on law enforcement side, it's different. But in an investigative standpoint, let's say you're doing an insurance fraud investigation. I think that is something simply that you just don't do. If their accounts are not open, publicly viewable, I think that trying to friend them and getting inside their account that way, I believe is not ethical.
Yeah.
And
Great.
and so when we're looking at ethics too, a lot of it obviously has to do with following the letter of the law. And states are different. Certain states
Correct.
have different regulations on what you can and cannot do. And so obviously I always try to tell everybody, you need to educate yourself on the statutes and the laws of each state that allows us or guides us in what we can and cannot do.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And so, yeah, but I really, the whole thing to me is the major ethics. And I've heard so many PIs and that will create undercover accounts and friend the individual that they're doing research on. And that to me is way into the gray area. And so that's what I would say, don't do.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And I'll take it one step further about knowing your state laws and everything like that. So there is actually opinion in New York where I operate out of, right, from the New York State Bar Association, that basically says if you're an investigator and you're hired by an attorney, you are bound to the same ethical constraints that the attorney is bound by. Yeah. And there's case law to support it, right? So, you not knowing look at me, I'm third party. I got nothing to do with this. Sure, I can throw that friend request out there. No, you can't. And if you have a smart defense attorney or smart plaintiff attorney, if you're working on the defense side, that's familiar with this, they can start questioning your work product. And now all of a sudden it's like, Your Honor, I'd like to make a motion to preclude this whole investigation because, they violated this, and you better pay your liability insurance. You better make sure that premium is up, because when the music stops and you don't have a chair, there's a problem, right?
Oh, I completely agree with you.
Yeah, it's.
And I was just going to say, and to go an extra level in an agreement, I think that the use of the databases and their comprehensive reports, when you turn around and try to put your company header on there and sell for $250, as your background search, that is so wrong. And the one thing, as a 23-year veteran investigator, that as an in-house advocate for the PI space, I'm also out there trying to educate. The big thing, Matt and I have conversations. I know that Michelle and I and others, I want to get, bigger and more into education of what's out there. Yep. And I don't believe that, a kid who puts a shingle up and decides he's a PI because he did a year apprentice, I almost don't want that individual, unless they're properly credentialed and vetted, to have access to any database I'm associated with. I had a kid call me up a couple of years ago. He was running somebody hired him to look up a famous senator in the Midwest. And he says, I did it. Neil, it's great. I got my first case. I said, if you turn that information over to the client, I'm reporting you. So there's a lot of people out there that I said, I was so upset. But the kid learned a good lesson. He didn't didn't turn it over. He didn't know who his client was. And they advertise out there, and it's a cloak and dagger world. People will pretend they're other people. People pretend they're me, and then try to get access to information. Yeah, that's what's really going on, even internationally. So, that's what I see the future of the databases with information. It's all the databases are going to tighten restraints a little bit, but the best thing that's going to come out of it is, especially the stuff we're working on at IDI, is that we're going to take the good investigators with us with some of the enhancements that we're bringing along. So that's what's exciting. That's what I'm excited to bring forward the rest of this year.
You got to roll with it, because reform is on the way.
It is.
When you have a judge's son murdered, and shot to death because a lawyer who didn't like a decision that she handed down, and the guy does some research and finds out where her home address is and shows up and shoots the son and the husband. And the first thing that the judge is saying is that, how did this guy have my home address? Like, that's a warning sign. Like, they're really going to start cracking down on this stuff. And there needs to be, we got to make sure that the investigative community, has a carve out, that they understand, like, hey, this isn't everybody that does, we need an exception here, because what we're doing, we make a difference in people's lives, and we're not those type of people that go out and do that. And Neil, I think you brought up a really good point, that I think a lot of times people are, they may attach that report or do whatever. It's not even intentional. It's not even like they're maliciously saying like, I can, charge $250 for this and just reattach it. It's more along the lines of, nobody ever told me I couldn't. Well, hey man, it's in your service contract that says you can't do it, but it's not taught by anybody, and I think it's like really important to have these conversations and ethically, so people know like, hey, you're not supposed to do this, and here's why. Goes a long way. Then you just violated your terms of services. You're done. Oh, but nobody told me I couldn't do it, right?
Yeah, yep. I had a guy just today sent an email that he didn't know he couldn't use the data for a certain reason,
right?
And it just blew my mind, because it wasn't like it was a young person.
Right.
It was somebody who had come from law enforcement background and was retained, and they just told me that they thought that was fine. And I said, I'm sorry. I thought, better of you. And please, I got to get more education out to these guys and gals and companies that are out there that are using information for the wrong reason. He didn't report it anywhere, but he just wondered if he could. And it just was, to me, just was inappropriate. I just thought it'd be common sense. Sometimes it's just, it's some of these, the investigators out there and the other people that, the researchers, they don't have intelligence enough to do it for the right reason. But that's why we do this podcast, Matt, right? And get people like Michelle talking about stuff and trying to get out there. Everybody loves to listen and learn, and that's the one thing that I want to keep pushing forward in the years to come with the databases.
People don't talk about it, and you don't know. And I think that's a lot of it's a discussion we have in our state industries or state associations. There's nobody, teaching the people that are just getting into this space on how to do it properly. They're not teaching them what to charge. They're not teaching them how to maintain their files, and not teaching them, how to actually do the work. It's scary. It really is. Anybody can hang their shingle up and say, hey, I'm here for business. And, I get the reason why the reports are attached. I totally get it, because you're charging service, right? Service. I'm going to do this for you. And then when you hand over a report that says, this is what I found, or I didn't find anything, your client's can be like, okay, well, show me the work. You show me what you found. So I want to see what I'm paying for. Right. Yeah. So their first inclination is, okay, well, I'm just going to, I'll just attach this PDF and here, this is what I did. You can't do that. Right. But nobody tells anybody about that. Right.
Well, and it seems also, and I know that you guys have seen it throughout your careers, everybody thinks they could be a PI. And and I can't even tell you how many times I'll be somewhere and somebody will find out what I do, and they're like, oh my gosh, I want to be a PI. Right. I'm really, really good at digging things up. What can I do? And unfortunately,
plant a garden.
People, but you get people like that, and there's a lot of times people are pulling information, like Neil, you were saying, that they're pulling reports when they shouldn't be pulling reports, because they don't have permissible purpose to pull that report.
Right.
Exactly.
And I think there's just a large, I don't want to say it. There's a group of individuals I don't think that have probably been trained on what they can and really cannot do.
Yeah,
that's what I'm here for. I'm going to make sure, I got a team, and we're out there and we're fighting hard with trainings, and eventually I want to get with the states and with the associations so that when I do like an hour-long training, get some CEUs out to the investigators so that they can partner with as we move forward in this virtual world. How many, I don't know when the next actual conference is going to go to. I don't know the next time I'm going to see Michelle Stuart up there talking 1,000 times a minute while I'm up, doing demos in the back, like I think we did in Kansas City, at least, which was awesome. A few other places along the way. But those were the best, and those are the places I've learned the most, and the places I think I was able to educate the most. When you get out talking to hundreds, and you get your influencers, your advocates, like a Michelle, like a Matt, so you can help us as we can grow this for the future, as opposed to shutting it down where there won't be any databases.
Yeah, and listen, I mean that's how you and I fostered our relationship. It wasn't a phone conversation. It was, somebody had a room, one of these hospitality suites, and you and I had a chance to, kick back and get to know one another, and that relationship was bonded, and that's what those events are for. It's basically building relationships like that. Yeah, really, really.
Yeah, that's what I said. I really miss. I miss that interaction with people, because when you're sitting there talking on a Zoom, and I don't care if I've got 500 people on a Zoom, there's no interaction. There's no happy hour. There's no networking where you walk around to the vendors. There's no somebody comes up and asks you questions, and then they introduce themselves and they're like, hey, I specialize in background investigations or tenant screening or corporate investigations. And you lose that because all you're doing as an instructor is you're looking at a camera. And so I, like with you guys forging your relationship, I really honestly believe that's where a lot of us, because as I said, I've been around for 30 years now. A lot of us, we all met each other normally, honestly, in hospitality rooms,
right? And
sitting around and just talking. And so I really hope we can get back to that.
Yeah, I think we'll get there. Just with masks.
Yep, I hope so. But the like minds always attract, and I think that with that and with commonality and information for using it for the right purpose, and as we expand out, even as we do it through here in the podcast sphere, I still think it's getting out there. So I do thank you, Matt, for doing this.
Yeah, no, it's great. I'm a little bit over a year now. I've been doing this show, and I just love it. It's addicting for me because I think people that do what we do, we have that inclination to ask questions and want to know what somebody's about and what they're about. That's like my guilty pleasure, that I'm curious about people. I want to know what your story is and what you do. And that was one of the things that really pushed me to decide to get into this and do this. And I've had a blast. I've talked to people all over the country, and it's been great. It's been inspiring. And networking, right? And not only that, forget about me. I'm introducing people in this industry to people all around the country. So Absolutely. Either you're learning how to do something or you're learning who to call when you need to do that something. Like, that's important. Hey, I didn't know who this Kelly Riddle guy is. I've got an ethical question. He's been doing this for 40 years. Let me reach out to him. He sounds like a cool guy. And, maybe he'll tell me to do the right thing, or, this Miss Brianne Joseph, she's fantastic with marketing. I'd like to learn how to do that. Let me reach out to her. Stuff like that I think is super, super important. Really, really good to know.
Well, if there's one thing people get out of this, I wish people would look up Michelle Stuart and see a lot of the content you get out there, Michelle. Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I sat there for 8 hours. And I think that your stuff could go on, and it has, go on for days. And you're doing an amazing. There's so much information. You almost want to record it and then break it into like 6 weeks worth of classes. That's how good it is.
Oh, I appreciate that. The thing about open source, and both you guys know, is it's so fluid. It's constantly changing.
Yeah.
And you might have a source today, and then by tomorrow it's gone.
Yeah.
And so, there's a large group of people out there that, kind of all give each other information and share via Twitter. And so it's kind of a brotherhood, a sisterhood. And I think it's probably one of the most enjoyable things I've ever done when it comes to investigations is going into the open source sector of things.
Yeah. I mean, there are literally over 1,000 of these free sites out there too. Right. And just knowing where to look and like I said, Michelle, here today, gone tomorrow, right?
Oh my God, that just happened today. Yeah, you love a site, you're so excited about it, you go to use it, and boom, it's gone.
What happened, right?
Facebook, good old Facebook.
Oh yeah. So listen, that's and now they're teasing, right? They bring back little things and then they turn them off, and it's.
I know. It's like a psych, constant game of psych.
Yeah, that API shutdown, that really that was a game changer for the industry. I mean, so many really cool products out there. Forget about just the investigator being able to do what they do on that, but even I saw whole business models. There was a company I had an agreement with for doing research, and they had this whole thing on object recognition and behavior recognition. And it was tied in so hard with Facebook. The second they turned that off, I went to the guy. I was like, "Listen, I can't pay you for your service. You don't do it anymore.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, I know we have a contract, but yeah, I think you got to let me out of that contract because you can't really deliver what you're doing. And we worked it out, but it was a shame because it was such a cool product, man. It was so good. And it's like, man, this thing is like, it's going to take over the world till someone decides to turn the switch off. Right. And it is.
Well,
what it is.
and look, and your story is perfect. Like what happened with even Instagram's API and the ability of geolocational capability for lat and long, right?
Yeah.
Because there's still certain ways that you could do some information on Instagram, but not like it was in the past. And, so as they keep changing things and, hitting privacy issues and getting sued and fined and everything else, I think it's going to become more and more difficult. And, we're always going to have to find a workaround. But some of those larger sites and what you might be talking about that were providing, geofencing capability with Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, several other ones, they were really hurt when all of that API started shutting down and when they stopped allowing that access.
Yeah, the five big ones. I mean, they completely had to change their models. And I was doing business with one of them, and it's like, okay, we can't do it this way. Now we have to do it that way. And we were able to linger on it for quite some bit. But even now it's kind of, it was a good run while it lasted.
That's so funny you say that.
Yeah.
It was a good run.
It was a good run.
Such a good run.
Made some money, Now it's time to find that next thing, which is why, and we're going to end it in a minute or two, which is why my new passion is the investigator's toolbox, right? So it's not now trying to latch myself onto that new product that's out there. It's creating a space for that new product for people to know about it, right? So, having that resource community where we can have those ethical conversations and we can learn about the latest open sources that are out there, and we can tie all that stuff in. That's a huge passion for me. And I know my listeners are probably sick of hearing about it already because I've been blowing it up like crazy, but I really do believe that, this is the future of where everything needs to go, right? Creating that one place for us to be the very best in our profession.
Yeah,
well, and I really believe that we all share. I've always been where if somebody needs something or they don't know where to go or they have a question like, what would you do with this? I think, honestly, we should all share and help each other out because there's enough work for everybody.
Oh, absolutely.
But it's also just a really good thing for us to be like what you're trying to do and create is just have a platform where people who don't maybe have the experience that some other people have, maybe somebody who's brand new coming into the business or even somebody who's been around for a while and they don't know where to go. It's just a really good idea as you have to have people share that.
Yeah. No, it's been
and lastly, I'd like just to add and to talking about things that are changing.
Yep.
We just announced that I think it was within the last month that we're moving to geospatial technology to kind of power how we're going to be running the IDI core database in the coming year. And what that means that we can use partial data elements to use almost a geotag from a pinpoint in a map to expand out from a mile to 50 miles and all probable matches to an individual or even to another piece of information. So a lot of stuff that we're implementing and building with IDI Core, what you're going to see coming out in the by the new year. It's really pretty exciting. It's for all of us data geeks as all the three of us. It's fun to from a database side and from a investigator's toolbox, which is awesome. From a lot of the open source stuff that you work with, Michelle, I still see everything not getting worse but getting better, just more defined.
Yeah, and I got to say, like, that's one of the things about a company like IDI, like why I want to continue to do business with them and utilize them is that research and development to get to that next level. Like, I love the fact that you're there, and I know that you've got the back of the investigator because you've been in the trenches. You know what we need. And when you're having those conversations of like, okay, let's talk about our calendar for the next year. Like, what's first quarter going to look like? What's second quarter? Like, what are we doing here? I know you're there advocating for us. I know you're saying, yes, we need to get this for these guys. Like, this is going to be a game changer. I know my people, right? I know what they're looking for. And yeah, there may be some things that we have to do so we can get there. And that's what I think some people fail to understand. This, in order to get to a certain area, especially now these days with reform coming, you got to make sure all your ducks are in a row, and that may make it a little painful for the smaller investigator, and they need to understand that, right? So I love that you're there, man, and I love the things you're doing. I think it's very, very exciting.
Yeah, it's been a journey. My C-level executives are amazing, from the CEO, CFO, president, CIO. I've known these guys for almost 15 years, back to Hank Asher years. So it is quite tremendous. And just to be able to sit and listen to these guys, they're obviously, we're a little scared that I could be a little bit of a cowboy, but I think I behave myself. I think
No.
Only in happy hours with you, Michelle.
We really need those hospitality rooms back.
Yeah, exactly.
You need to get some things off your chest.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
oh, lordy.
So, Michelle, why don't you tell folks how they can get a hold of you?
They can get a hold of me via my email address, Michelle with one L, Michele at JAG Investigations. Or they could call me at 480-988-2580.
Okay, perfect.
Or I do have a Twitter handle of MSJAGINV, like investigations.
Awesome.
MSJAGINV as in Victor.
Great. We're going to put all that in the show notes anyway. So, Neil, how about you? How do folks get a hold of you?
Yeah, and if anybody wants to get in touch with Michelle and they can't find her, I'm sure you guys can find me very easily at IDI, because I have been talking to seriously hundreds of PIs over the last couple of weeks. So continue to call me and I'll make sure I give you Michelle's information as well.
My home address.
Don't do that. Please don't do that.
Yeah. But seriously, you can email me at ncaddell, NCADDELL at ididata.com. Or you can just, go to IDI, Google it, call up the number, ask for Neil, or ask for the PI guy. They'll all find me very quickly, because they always do.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you so much. This was really fun. And I feel like we covered a lot of topics here. And we even kind of went into the whole ethics here, made a little bit of a right turn, but definitely a necessity. So I appreciate you guys participating, being part of this. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And we will be back on Monday with another show. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you, Matt.
Well, that was fun. It was hard to wrap this show up early. Thanks to Neil and Michelle for coming on and being so candid. We also want to thank Amos, Crosstracks, IDI, and USABugSweeps.com for sponsoring the show. Have you checked out Investigator's Toolbox yet? Remember, it only takes 41 cents a day to unlock the future of investigations. Make an investment in your business and yourself today. The 25% legacy discount won't last long. Use code PIP201836 to save even more. If you got a question or comment about the show, email Matt at matthews@satellitepi.com. You can also find Matt on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. We want your feedback to bring you the best shows possible. And we'll be back next Monday with a new show. Hope you tune in and stay safe out there.